Hi, Doris.
Hi, Marcus.
So here we are. Research matters, okay? And it matters to me, and I know it matters to you. And, you know, I should introduce you first, though. So, Professor Doris Rusch, and she's the first professor of game design at Uppsala University, which is a rather posh university in Sweden, right? But for some reason, probably because she's so interesting as a person, they put her on an island in the middle of the Baltic on her own, almost, which is terrific because it means I get to visit this island when I go to Sweden, for instance, and half the doors behind me are photographed from the little town of Visby, which was a great place for Vikings, and you know, in this 13th, 11th, 12th, 13th century, and you know, it's where Doris actually hangs out. So, Doris, what turns you on? What's fun for you before we start on the serious questions of life?
Yeah, the Viking part is cool. I had a map of Gotland on my bedroom wall for a year before we actually moved here, because I was very much absorbing the vibe of the rough nature of Gotland. So I love gardening. I love the sea. I love being surrounded by water. I love the old myths. Like, this whole island is so magical in a way. It just is so absorbing all of these myths from the olden days.
Yeah.
And I like to bask in that energy. I have a family here, so that's great fun. And we have 2 cats, and we have a bunny, and we have a big garden.
And you do CrossFit, right? So
I do CrossFit. I spend a lot of time at the local CrossFit box, and that's where my tribe hangs out, and that keeps me sane. Yeah.
So we're in institutions, we have to keep sane. It's very important.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely.
Do something else. So,
yeah.
Doris, that's a lovely introduction. Thank you. I would like to ask you about research. So, you know, what's the purpose in your mind? What's the purpose or function of research?
Yeah, you know, I always get really nervous when people talk to me about research, because then I immediately want to go to what have I heard about what is research supposed to be? And then I remember, oh, I'm a researcher, so I should just know this. And for me, the purpose and function of research is to spend some dedicated time with a topic that piques my curiosity in a really deep way, and engage with it from multiple perspectives in a systematic, analytical, but also somewhat holistic way.
That's
and
great.
Yeah, so that's, I would say that's it on the most on the highest level. That's research for me. So everything that I engage in with this kind of curiosity and eagerness to absorb as much as I can about it, I'm doing research about.
That's great. And, you know, everybody uses that word curiosity, which is one of my favorite words, of course. And, you know, I don't think, you might correct me on this, but I don't think we should research something we're not curious about.
Yeah, there is definitely, like, I don't know how you could do that. I would be bored out of my mind.
Yeah.
I've been told I am in danger of, they called it going native, of being too absorbed in the things. Well, I came to understand that it means you get too involved in what you are researching, that you get blind to your subject because you're so much part of it. But that comes from this idea that we can actually be objective in that kind of way. That
split between subject and object.
Yeah. And so if I'm really curious about something, I want to fully immerse myself into it, because for me, research and knowledge is not just something that happens in my head, it happens in my whole body. And for that, without curiosity, how could I sustain that? So there has to be the passion, there has to be a lived experience.
So you're already in a sense, starting to answer my second question, which is how do you approach research? You know, you approach it as a whole-bodied person. Can you speak a little more to that, Doris, please?
Yeah. Yeah. It just sort of happens to me, I think. So I go through these phases. Like I'm horrible explaining it in a really systematic way. There is a system to it, and it becomes more and more mapped out and analytical as I go along. But I tend to just open myself up to this kind of curiosity, and then go where the hunches lead me. So when I start reading something, I make connections. Ooh, I remember there was a newspaper article that sort of connects to that. Okay, then I will look that up. Then I see a flyer on some wall somewhere for a group that meets, you know, that does something that seems strangely related, but I don't quite know what it is. So it's a lot about connection making between different domains, between different areas of expertise, and also between different ways of doing things. Because I'm a very practice-based researcher. So as a game designer, I make. As a writer, I make. As a storyteller, I make in a way. And it is so much about experience. And experience is not just up here, it's everywhere. So how my hunches, as I call them, my spidey sense, the scent I get for a research question that puts me on the trail, that's very, very important as my navigational instrument. And so I feel my way through different topics and mapping them out.
I'm with you on that one. I'd like you to say a little more about the serendipity of research. So you're talking about seeing a flyer on the wall and there's a group meeting here and you don't know what they're doing, but you know, your instinct says there's something in that you need to have you need to research, really. Can you speak a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, I think it's its own practice to hone that kind of inner compass or intuition that you know what resonates. And then to listen to that and not think that's a waste of time. So that's more like things start to flow through you in a more effortless and easy way than you setting intentionally the course very intellectually. And it took me half my life to forget most of my education and unlearn what I've been taught on how to do research properly, to be able to use this navigational instrument that I have that is fully embodied to find out the things that speak to me. And to great success, actually, because it allows me to make connections that feel genuine to me and that other people wouldn't make in that sense. And that allow me to make contributions that are not obvious. So if I'm connecting mythology with sustainability and game design and somatics, that's not necessarily something that everybody sees. And so it's trusting these intuitions and these hunches and these curiosities of this or that person needs to talk to that person, or this is something I want to experience. And then underneath it all, it's just constantly working and boiling and connecting without me having to make much of a conscious effort. And then suddenly giving myself plenty of downtime also, like the rest part is crucially important to how I do research, and it's becoming more and more important the older I get and the less I let systems drive me.
Drive you crazy.
Suddenly there's, exactly. Suddenly there's this is interesting. And then I start writing. That
space is really important. The space for still time, the space for, because that's when our subconscious, whatever, superconscious mind, whatever we want to call that, often does a whole bunch of connecting of dots that are kind of randomly floating around. This is what I've found. So space is important for research. You can't just grab something, start researching, and immediately produce a golden egg.
No, exactly.
A result.
But there is so much pressure that comes to that. Like if you don't sit and force your brain to produce text that's insightful and brilliant, then you're wasting your time. But I feel that exactly this practice that a lot of us people in academia, from students to professors, engage in all the time, it's just a recipe for disaster and sadness, burnout. I've come to see that the rest days are as important as the training days. It's true for physical practice, it's true for intellectual practice or creative practice.
Yep. Yeah, no, I think that's right. And especially for creative people. Yeah, definitely. So tell us, third question, tell us about how is this happening in your work today or this week or this month or year? You know, what are you involved in terms of research that might illustrate some of what you're talking about here?
Right. So there are a bunch of things that I'm throwing into my cauldron right now. I am, on the one hand, super interested in the somatics work, so how to work with wisdom with the body and through the body. How to let our sensations guide us and not immediately tell stories about what we're feeling. These stories become our emotions in a way. This is both a physical practice and a coaching practice that I am training in and practicing in. It's also an interest in neuroscience. So I've been doing a lot of reading and studying around interpersonal neurobiology, the different processing patterns of the right and the left brain, and the incredible importance of the connectedness that is ascribed to the right brain processing of our perceptions. And I'm connecting this to questions around regeneration and sustainability. So if we don't have this kind of openness and the feeling that we are part of something bigger, if we cannot really transcend that sense of we are confined in this body, this is the self, this is the individual, this is all that matters somehow, it's really hard to cultivate empathy. If it's really hard to cultivate empathy or the sense of entanglement, it's really hard to truly care about the environment.
That's true.
So,
entanglement. Can you speak a little more, Doris, about entanglement, please?
Oh, but I actually know very little, but I read Karen O'Brien's book on You Matter More Than You Think, and she's drawing on what's her name, Barak's Meeting the Universe Halfway. So she's using quantum physics as a metaphor to understand complex social change. And the entanglement of particles that are spatially completely, like they're not at the same location, they're not related, and yet they're related, they're entangled with each other. This is really weird. And I don't understand half of it, like I don't understand a fraction of it, but I like it as a metaphor.
It's a great metaphor, but this entanglement is a metaphor for, I mean, the quantum entanglement is a metaphor for a whole range of ecological perceptions, you could say. We're entangled. You like gardening, and I remember you telling me a story about Max. Max is Doris's son, out there with a worm. Okay, so the worm, the soil, the microbes, our bodies are filled with. You know, this is the sort of entanglement I think that this quantum metaphor is pointing to. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we are part of that soil in a way. We will be at some point.
And the soil is part of us too. Yes.
And it's part of us. And it's part of us. And when you really go for this kind of life force, energy, whatever word we use for this intangible thing that's really, really hard to talk about, then it opens up how we relate to students. Like it informs my teaching.
Yes.
It informs how I design something or for whom. So empathy for the player. What does that actually mean? I'm creating possibility spaces and putting my energy into systems that other people engage with. And then how do I give them the freedom to engage with it playfully, yet also putting something in there that they can reasonably take away from this?
Yeah.
So it's this dance between control and liberation, and putting in some spice of topics, and having this informed by a lot of different interests. So it's one of my main collaborators, Andy Phelps, super great game designer and scholar, described me as somebody who writes in a stream of consciousness kind of way. And I do, but I can also tell you how these things come together.
Yeah.
But it's a real hot steaming mess as it's in the process, as you can tell when I talk about it.
Yeah, yeah. That's why you like the metaphor of the cauldron, of course. I like that.
Yes, it's like the witch brew.
I know we're actually coming towards the end of our time, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about pleasure, because I get this sense, having actually met you and done some, just some little things, that pleasure is really important to how we research in some way. There's an emotional connection, but it's also just pleasurable. Wherever that is, I'm going to be quiet and give the space to you.
Yeah, I think life is just too short in general to do things that torture us. So it's pleasure, enjoyment, engagement. I associate pleasure also with a certain passivity, like eating a chocolate cake is pleasure. With the quality that I look for when I do research is more this kind of engagement, that I can lose myself in it, that I can really enter a deep, absorbed stillness. And I know that I'm onto something when I get really, really calm.
Okay.
Like something rings true. So there is an excitement phase to it, and there is a sustaining of the excitement as I'm following the breadcrumbs to interesting stuff. But when I find a particularly insightful piece that makes something click for me, I know the experience that I look for is not pleasure. It's actually this really deep spaciousness and calm. It's like, this feels true. This rings true. There's something to that.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Doris. Before we finish, what would be one piece of advice you'd give to somebody setting out on the research path?
Yeah, don't listen to any advice you get.
Don't listen to advice. I like that. Fantastic. Yeah, that's probably the best advice you could give.
Find your own compass and trust that. I think I told this to a friend of mine recently. We did a bit of a life coaching sesh. And I said, you don't have to do anything, then hone your compass first. Find the thing, find that connection to your own wisdom. Yeah. That's your job. And she said, oh, that gives me goosebumps. It's like, so then you know exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, beautiful.
So that's my advice.
Thank you, Doris. So you don't have to take that advice, but it's good advice. I like it. Doris, it's been a real pleasure. And, we could talk for hours, of course, which we have done in the past.
Yep.
I will let you go. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And
same to you, Marcus.
We'll be in touch. Yeah.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye.